Broadcasting has been my career, most of my career, then ended up in an 11-year foray into politics and ended up in the Isle of Man's legislature, in the upper house of the island's legislature called the Legislative Council. And for my sins, did 11 years there. They talk about it being the oldest continuous parliament in the world. Tynwald dates back to 979, when the Vikings set up the Tynwald. It's true, it's continuous. We don't have party politics here. So you end up with this mishmash of a parliament of independents who generally operate on consensus. But because of that, you don't get a clear policy on how the place is going to be run. In the UK, if you vote for Labour or the Tories or whoever, you have a broad idea on what they stand for. I know we could laugh at that, having seen the last sort of 10 years and now the new start to Keir Starmer's period in office. But nevertheless, generally, with the parties, you know what their general policies are. With the Isle of Man, you don't. And what happens is, and having been in there for 11 years, I've seen it in operation from the inside, and I don't like it. The whole thing effectively is run by the civil service and the whim of civil servants. And unless you get really, really strong members of Parliament, nothing will happen. I think the Isle of Man is the epitome of cronyism. I mean, it really is. When you see appointments to committees, boards, government quangos, you know, you can almost predict the list of names. And I've never been in that clique because I don't conform. And that doesn't mean it's just to be disruptive. It's because, believe it or not, I care deeply about the Isle of Man. I just can't stand the way it's run. And that I think is the thing with a lot of people. They always sort of, the old Manx say, well, if you don't like it, there's a boat in the morning. I think that's completely the wrong attitude for someone who cares deeply about the Isle of Man. Because what we should be saying is, no, you know, this, whatever it is, this stinks. Let's sort it out. Not, if you don't like it, leave. And I think, you know, that's the problem, where Manx people are so proud of their heritage and being Manx and from the Isle of Man, they're sort of almost looking at the place through rose-tinted spectacles, and they don't see that they're actually getting quite a bum deal by this notion of self-governance. They're paying through the nose for it. The annoying thing is that the Isle of Man government used to have some highly competent people in years gone by. And if we look back at history, the Isle of Man government achieved some of the best things ever when they had no money. They embarked on some major engineering projects. Now, they were all done pretty much in-house, like the construction of a huge reservoir. Massive, massive scheme done in the 1980s when the island had no money. It was before the boom time. They delivered those schemes to high standards. Chief executives of government departments were very sort of hands-on. They'd run with, you know, they'd have a chief executive and a secretary heading up the department, and things used to get done. Now what's happened is we've got chief executives on vastly higher salaries than they used to be on. There's no performance element to these roles. And what we're seeing now is that they've not only got the chief executive, but they've now created these chief operating officer roles. So it's like another chief executive, but then still go out to consultants. So it's very bizarre where of course you need consultants for certain projects, of course you do. But there's a lot now is farmed out to consultants, when really you have to ask why we're paying the senior officials so much. Surely we're hiring them for their expertise. The Isle of Man Liverpool ferry terminal is so disgraceful it's funny, but it's not funny. It's an absolute scandal of the highest order. This scheme, which started in my dying days in politics, And I said at the time, what on earth are you considering doing this for? Or I might have said we at the time, because I was in the Parliament. I said, this is just outrageous. And that was when it was due to cost £20 million. It's now, they don't know the final figure because they say they don't know. And I mean, how can they not know? They must know what they've spent to date, and they must have a rough idea on some of the costs. We're over £70 million now. The site isn't even a very good site. They're not allowed freight. So to build a port where you're not allowed freight from the get-go is just, again, sheer incompetence. And now it's built. They've got a very expensive tin shed that they can't do anything with because it's in a secure maritime area, so they can't use it for anything else other than a ferry terminal. They've now discovered that the new ship that the steam packet have purchased, mainly for the Haitian run, the doors don't line up with the Liverpool landing stage. Now, I understand the ferry company are not to blame for this. The design of the ship was already in process. So they've now got to send the ship, I believe, to have another hole cut in the side, to have another door for when it goes to Liverpool, because the £70 million terminal doesn't, the loading for the passengers doesn't line up with the doors. I mean, you can't make this up. This is going on all the time, where they're botching up contracts, tenders. You know, if you read social media, it's always brown envelope. I've got to say, my experience in government, I would say the bulk of it is sheer incompetence. The Lord Street development seems to have been going on forever. It's on the site of the old bus station, which people look back now with fond memories. I mean, it was no doubt when it was built, it was in its heyday. It was the bus and air terminal where you could check in for the airport and all the heyday of travel. It was pretty run down in its latter days. It was not really fit for purpose. So they demolished it with a view to building a fantastic town centre development. But it seems to have been going on forever. And I almost at the stage myself where, you know, every time somebody releases some artist's impression, architect's impression of what the site is going to look, you sort of think, oh, are we ever going to see spades in the ground, as they say? And it just goes on and on and on. And I don't know where the blockage is, but quite often it's usually through government bureaucracy. Now, the fact that no one's been allowed to do it yet means we've got an absolute eyesore in the middle of the town. It's not even a nice-looking car park, if there is such a thing. It's just waste ground that cars are parked on. It's the gateway to the island's capital. The whole area looks run down. They did try and spice it up a bit by putting some large lap fencing around it and a few planters. But, you know, even the roundabout opposite has got, you know, knee-high weeds growing out of it. There's just no excuse for this sort of thing. And this is what we're seeing all the time. That it's almost like the place is run down and that causes the rest of the area to be run down. But that car park, yeah, I mean, it's just waste ground. The site needs development. Now, my own view on it is that I'm not sure at the moment why any developer would particularly want to commit that level of investment into the Isle of Man when we've got such an unpredictable government. But that's another example of a government site that remains undeveloped. And there are many others. But Lord Street is just continuing to be an embarrassment to the town centre. And I can remember a quote from somebody talking of tenders when they were speaking about the Liverpool development. And if I use that as an analogy, somebody said that they'd sent their Premier League side and we'd sent sort of, you know, Sunday League. It was one of those examples on just the difference of ability between the Isle of Man government negotiating something and people you're doing business with. It's just woeful. And I think with regard to the Lord Street case, the millions of pounds are just flowing out of that government for all sorts of botched schemes, decisions, and nobody is ever held accountable. It's astonishing, the money that's flowing out. So with regard to the scheme at Lord Street, then yes, no doubt there was considerable, and a lot of these figures are in the public record. They accepted a tender and then changed their mind. That doesn't surprise me one bit.